Welcome to the S2 Cognition podcast. S2 is the official cognitive evaluation in sports, from youth to pro, where athletes and coaches build to win.
We are so back with the S2 Cognition podcast and thrilled to bring this episode to you. Returning as your host, Harrison Hunter here, joined by former NFL quarterback Luke McCown. The 14-year NFL vet talks about the complex decisions that quarterbacks have to make in the line of fire. Then we explore the nuances of offensive schemes, play action, and post-snap reads, while also covering the evolution of offensive strategies and the cognitive impact of motion on reads and assignments. For those that are new here, welcome. We're excited to have you today, and those that are returning listeners, we always appreciate your support and are so thankful for you. To help us continue our growth, we ask that you subscribe, rate, and review our show. Enjoy Luke McCown. Luke, I really appreciate you joining today. We're going to talk about decision complexity and all the decisions that quarterbacks have to execute in real time, right? We're going to get into, it's one thing to know the rules and reads and pre-snap. What does that look like post-snap? Are they different? So appreciate you joining us. We're going to talk about a plethora of things, but really focusing on that decision element of what a quarterback has to do. And appreciate 14-year vet. You're going to have a lot of experience in this area.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
What really generated some of this topic for me, you and I had a long discussion about decision complexity, when we were first on the Zoom. But for better or for worse, I do spend some time on Twitter, and I noticed a debate going on about, is there such a thing as a quarterback-friendly offense? Yeah. And of course, the vast majority of people chiming into that discussion have zero experience playing quarterback. So I would wanted to go to the horse's mouth and just, hey, from a quarterback's perspective, is there such a thing as a quarterback friendly offense, and what does that look like?
Yeah. So I would absolutely agree that there is a quarterback friendly offense, because I got to play in a number of different offenses, and particularly from my rookie year to my second year, going from Cleveland in a Terry Robisky, Rod Chazinski, more play action down the field type offense, to my second year in John Gruden, who was like West Coast to a T. Like, we were so West Coast that when I got there, we didn't even have a shotgun in. Like, we were one of the last teams to develop a shotgun offense. And so everything that we did was under center. I mean, 5-step rhythm. That was 2005. Man. So 5, 6, 7, and 8. I was in an offense. We didn't put in the shotgun. I really don't think we took a shotgun drop till 2007. And so that was myself, Chris Sims, Brian Greasy, Jeff Garcia, Bruce Gradkowski's rookie year. And so, so really moving from, kind of a down the field, play action oriented offense that wanted chunks, to a ball control, get the ball out of your hand, quick timing, more based on rhythm and progression than it was coverage and matchup, right? And so moving from that offense to Tampa Bay in 2005, and then from there going to Jacksonville Jaguars and Dirk Cutter, who was, again, back to down the field offense. We threw a lot of posts. We threw a lot of go, a lot of play action, 7 pumps and stuff like that. Threw a lot of different things and it was all based on coverage. It was all, he didn't really care. Like, we're going to get our eyes to the right spot. Mike Shula was the quarterback coach. We're going to get our eyes to the right spot based on what the defense does. And, that was vastly different from what I'd been doing for 5 years or 4 years in Tampa Bay, where John Gruden, we didn't talk about coverage hardly at all. It was middle field open, middle field closed, right? 1 safety or 2 safety. And then is it man or zone? And that was the extent of it. And then if we had an alert, like if you get quarters, obviously we want to throw a post, something like that. But that was pretty much the extent of it. Is it man, zone, 1 safety or 2 safety? Well, and from there, we just progressed through.
So the difference between even in 2005 to 2008 and now today, because it's far different today, right? We got all this motion now. We've got introduction of
Yeah.
Just the speed and timing and everything's that difference from, and I know you're probably working your way there, but just how different is that from today, from what was that, 20 years ago, 15 to 20 years ago? It's not
Yeah.
that long.
Appreciate it. Yeah. It was, it seems like a long time ago. Yeah. No, I
Not
think
my
it's very
intention.
different. No, it's all good. I think it's very different. Because pre-snap, you've got a lot of moving parts. You've got a lot of moving parts. And so, um, in my mind, Peyton Manning didn't want a lot of moving parts. You didn't see a whole lot of motions and shifts, right? Because he wanted you to line up as a defense, and I'm going to tell you what you're about to do, right? I know based on how you lined up, like there's not going to be, which is why he had trouble with Baltimore Ravens and New England Patriots. You got a 3-4 type defense that moved around a lot. Like we called it this amoeba defense that just kind of they could turn into anything. And I think Peyton would agree. There was usually some struggle there because he wanted to know where you were going to be at the snap of the ball. Well, when we've got jet motions and sweeps that you see Andy Reid doing, and you got all these different things, I don't know how you can say, well, it's going to be this coverage or that coverage. Now, obviously, if a defender runs with a motion, it's man coverage, right? We understand that. Outside of changing strength, and they're going to be one short. So outside of that, if you typically get a traveling defender with a motion, it's going to be some form of man. Now defenses have gotten good too. Like they're not dumb. They they play to what you're doing. They play your tendencies with this motion. Hey, if we're motioning from 2x2 to 3x1, we're going to travel and then get into zone from there. Okay, there's that. I think that's rare because that's a hard thing to do. Um, because typically your zone drops are based on the release of the receiver. So the zones that you're trying to hit in your drop are based on that. So a lot of moving parts makes it, I think, more difficult. So to me, the most quarterback friendly an offense can be is to say, no matter what, our eyes are starting here. We're trying to throw this, right? We're trying to throw this speed out. We're trying to throw this shallow cross coming in front, and number one. Then number two is on a basic cross and a dig, the classic flanker drive, route concept. And from there is number three. You got a back checking across, something like that. But the quarterback friendly offense got a bad rap because we didn't push the ball down the field, and everybody called it a dink and dunk offense. And I was probably accused of this at some point. They called Brian Greasy captain check down, and Alex Smith captain check down, right? But you look up and you see these guys completing 68, 69, 70% of their passes. Now, the really sweet sauce of it all is when you get a marriage of a mind like Sean Payton and Drew Brees. And Sean was very heavy West Coast, but he was good enough in the scheme of play action and down the field. And Drew was so phenomenal with his timing and accuracy that it made sense to do it all. But that's why when you see these marriages happen of quarterback and offensive mind, and it's very rare. You get the Bill Walsh and the Joe Montanas or the Breeze and the Paytons, and they marry up. Something special is about to happen. To me, quarterback friendly is like take some of the thinking out of it. Let me use my feet to tell me when and where to throw the ball based on is number one open. If he is, I'm giving him the ball. If he's not, I'm moving on. Now, I think there's levels to that. I always say I got better as a quarterback when I went from Tampa and had a firm grasp on how to play with my feet telling me when and where to throw the ball based on the progression. Okay. When I went from there to, and again, we didn't talk about coverage, and to Jacksonville and Dirk Cutter, who wanted me to come off the field and tell him what coverage was that. Not what the safety did, not what the corner did. What was the coverage? And it took me about a year to really get comfortable with that. To be quite honest, it took me about a year but once I did, and I married the relying on my feet to help me make decisions, and now my eyes confirming what my feet are telling me, That's when I play some of my best football.
So is that Mike McDaniel's offense then today? If you had a very short, simple answer, is it the timing at which his scheme and Tua is marrying his feet with the timing of where he's supposed
Yeah.
to go?
Yes, absolutely. When you watch Tua, I think you see him get the ball out on one hitch a lot. And here's the thing that most people don't understand is when an offensive minded coach, when he's scheming up a play, he wants you to throw it to that number one. Like there's the reason why we're scheming that. Now it helps to have, the cheetah, and it helps to have, Waddle and those guys that can get open, number one, right? But defenses know that too. They know who number one is. When you line up in formations, they know who you're trying to get the ball to. So the ability to scheme up where a ball comes out on one hitch does so much for your offense, does obviously rhythm and timing for your quarterback, confidence for your offensive line, and then, frustration from the defensive side of it, right? But Mike McDaniel does a great job of not letting Tua hold on to the ball because, hey, number one's open. The ball should be out of your hand. So you don't see a whole lot of, of 2 and 3 hitch throws for Tua.
Luke, what for you, thinking through all of that, what makes an offense from a quarterback's perspective, what makes it complex?
When you have an offense that really tries to specialize in, we're only a shot offense. We're only we don't have quick game. And I would say that we had, like in Jacksonville, for instance, or even Atlanta when I was there again with Dirk Cutter behind Matt Ryan, we ran the ball so well that we didn't need quick game. Maurice Jones-Drew, Michael Turner, we ran the ball so well we didn't need a quick game. And so he didn't, Dirk's mindset was, I don't want to throw the ball for 3 yards. I don't want to go through all that trouble to throw the ball for 3 yards. And when we could just turn around and hand it off and we take some of the risk out of it and all that good stuff. So I think what ends up happening that makes an offense complex is, or hard, is when you say we're throwing this versus this coverage. Disguises are so good, and they're numerous. You can have 4 carry, you can have 3 carry, 3 bust, 3 lightning, 1 hole, 1 robber. What's the difference there? Quarter, half? Is it quarter, half with a half side being man now? Just a plethora of different coverages. And when you isolate it and say we're only throwing this versus this coverage, and if it's not that coverage, we're throwing that, man, that gets really, really hard.
Because you're wrong quick, right? If
you're
those
wrong
options aren't
really
there.
fast.
Yeah.
So it becomes 1 to a check down. Then you do become, captain check down because you don't know what the coverage was. So I didn't want to throw it. So that's, to me, that's what makes it, an offense complex.
Well, let me dovetail off this really quickly because I think, and I might rant here a little bit, so I apologize to both of you. Why does run action work, right? Why does play action work? And I do want both of you guys to answer this because I want the quarterback's perspective, and then I also want the scientist's perspective on why does run and run action and the marriage between both work. The reality is when it's mirrored the same, right? And so that's why under center run action probably works a little bit better than shotgun run action because
Absolutely.
the marriage of where the eyes and what everything is telling us of where the defense is flowing. So Brandon, from a science perspective, why is it so difficult for a brain to decipher the difference?
Once the overlay of the visual processing of what's going to happen. So as soon as it looks like a run, right? And so you're under center, you're more apt to get a run there. When it looks like a run in the NFL, open is 12 inches, right? So if you can get a DB or a linebacker to hesitate for less than a half a second, when the offense knows what's coming, the receiver's at a huge advantage, right? You're taking a step in the wrong direction. You're capitalizing on the impulse to stop the run. And so if you can put a DB or a linebacker at a disadvantage for half a second, now you're talking about odds going up for open, right? And we ramp up that motor threshold the more times we've gotten beat by the run. So the more times that these guys are getting more than a yard or two on a run, that linebacker crew is wired up. They dial up their motor system to stop the run. And as
Yep.
soon as we stop the run, that opens up the passing game. I know this is sort of elementary from a football perspective, but from a brain science perspective, you're literally capitalizing on the way the brain is wired to respond to a certain visual.
That's
We
it.
always link up our motor system to what we see. So if we're seeing run, I'm telling you, a tick of brain speed, just a tenth of a second, is the difference of a quality receiver getting open. And
Yeah.
so if we can make it look like run, obviously you've got a better shot of somebody being open there.
Yeah. And I can't remember if I gave credit, but it was Greg Olson that was really on this about like, hey, it's got
Yeah.
to be under center versus in shotgun. From a quarterback perspective, Luke, when you hear that discussion, does it resonate and make sense? And you're probably experienced as to why.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not all too different than the conversation we were just having about coverages, right? We're talking about variables, and that's the issue. We're talking about, and that the game of football in and of itself, because of the number of players. So I'm trying to get 5 eligible receivers out on a route. I've got to worry about 7 guys or 6 guys or 5 guys or 4 guys rushing, all the variables that come into this, and each one of them have eyeballs that are trying to decipher and identify, oh yeah, by the way, you're only taking snapshots. And I'm trying to decipher what's happening through snapshots. Okay. And so the play action part of it is the variables that come with it. I could hand it off. It looks exactly like a handoff. I could turn around and come out on the boot or come out on the play action and hit the fullback, or I could come out with eyes up looking for a shot. The number of things that you can do when you turn your back to the defense with the ball in your hand, they're, whatever those, things going off in their brain are red alert, because now it's like, I don't know what's about to happen, but I've got to be ready for it. And so that's where we get into play speed. It's being able to cancel out really quickly what is about to happen, right? It's about, based on formations, based on personnel, whatever it is, it's what's about to happen. Not what they're showing me now, but the really good ones can go, all right, I know that with the play action, but they weren't in this formation, they weren't in this personnel, so I'm not worried about this. I'm not worried about this particular run. I'm not worried. They didn't pull a guard, so I'm not worried about that. And they can check those boxes off really, really fast.
Yeah, play action or play anticipation, right? We hear this
Yeah.
all the time. It's how do you measure
Well,
that?
what's wild is you're talking about decision complexity, but from the defender's point of view.
But
I want to flip that around on you, right? And so we do talk frequently, and I think a lot of when we start thinking through complexity, people start going through all of these pre-snap. And there's absolutely a ton of complexity pre-snap. At S2, we're mainly interested in post-snap, the complexity of the post-snap and all of these if-then statements that you've got to filter through. Because just like you talked about it from a defender's point of view about, okay, if the run happens, here's what I'm going to have to do. If he bubbles out, here's what I have to do. If he looks downfield, here's what I'm going to have to do.
Right.
From a brain perspective, the more options that you layer on, the slower we all make decisions.
Yep.
So, but obviously you can see it in quarterback play as clear as day. Some of us can filter through those rules much quicker than others post snap. Right. And so talk to us a little bit about that post snap. Okay. I've got ISO on, my wide receiver here. What are you reading from a cornerback's perspective that's going to tell you what coverage and what route your receiver is going to run? What are those kinds of cues that you've got to filter through to give you that information?
Yeah, depth of their stance, right? Are they pressed or are they off? That's kind of the easiest most noticeable thing. And then it's posture of their shoulders. Are they kind of leaning in? Are they turned more towards me? Leverage, right? Are they turned more towards me with kind of eyes on me? Kind of thinking more zone. If I'm dead eye to the court to the receiver, I'm thinking more man, right? And then is he inside? Is he outside? Because that tells me what type of man it's going to be, right? Because if he's inside leverage and I've got 2 safeties then I know it's probably some form of two-man, right? Because their only help is the sideline, right? If he's outside leverage and and press, then I kind of feel like it's going to be some kind of a one funnel, one hole, something where his help is on the inside of it, right? And so, but again, those are things that I've got to snap. I've got a snap clock counting down. I've got to decide these things very. Oh, by the way, I got to check that receiver too and see what the leverage and technique of the corner is over here. And so
and
that would
line,
be
right. You got to get your line. You got to get everybody in
and
the
the
right
line
position. Yeah.
I've got a nickel edge pressure that's kind of acting like he wants to do something. So I got to worry about what the protection is and just kind of all those different things, right? And so, but the hardest part of all of that is, like you said, what happens after the snap? Because they can show me whatever they want pre-snap. But they're liars. Every defense player is a liar. They're all liars. And so they can show me whatever they want pre-snap. And but it ultimately it doesn't matter. The good defenses, it doesn't matter what they show me pre-snap. And so how good am I on picking it up in a millisecond, right? And seeing that technique. The hard part about corners, since you asked about corners, the hard part about it is that we don't get to look at them. Like you won't find a quarterback that just gets to drop back and see the technique of the corner or see the release. There was a clip of CJ Stroud this week or last week, OTAs, and it was a throw to Meacham down the sideline. It was on Twitter, and it would have been a heck of a Meachie, excuse me, not Robert Meacham, but Jay Meachie.
Meacham?
And Meacham. I said Meacham.
You're throwing me back to my early childhood days, baby.
There you go. Robert was a great dude. And but anyway, it was kind of over the shoulder, and it was, oh man, tough catch, hard throw, whatever. And I made a comment that I said, well, the hardest part about that is that CJ didn't get to see that Michi went inside on his release.
On the release,
we don't, because we have to hold the safety, right? So I may get to peek, but rarely, especially to my left hand side, do I get to take the snap, look over there, confirm the release, and then get back here to the safety and try to hold him from getting over there. Because number two is, if I know he went inside, then I've got to make sure I hold the safety. So I make sure. So it's compounding the problem, and it changes how I have to throw the ball now. Because if he gets an inside release and I'm not able to hold the safety, if I don't drive this ball on a line, then the safety is going to get there quick and either be a blow up or a broken up pass or an interception. Right. And none of those are good. So that's the hard part about what the corners do, because you don't get to check their technique after the snap. So it's going back to, kind of predicting almost what happens next is, what are the safeties telling me that the corners are doing? What are the safeties telling me that they're going to, how they're going to respond and react? Now, some of that film study, some of that tendencies, right? But a lot of times just in the general scheme of, if I know it's man or zone, and offenses are sophisticated enough now where if I put a tight end on the outside or a running back on the outside and I'm motioning back in, and if a safety or a linebacker goes out there with either one of them, I kind of know it's man to man. So now, whatever the safeties tell me they're doing, I at least know it's man, okay, and I'll know what type of man it is, okay. But a lot of times I have to rely on what the safeties are doing to tell me what kind of technique that these corners are going to be playing. And that's where we talk about complexity with what happens after the snap. Okay, now what route or what matchup or who's running this route? What do I like best about it versus what they just showed me or what they're telling me that the corners are going to be doing?
Every time that we have conversations like this, I am increasingly aware of how much I don't know, and just am flabbergasted by the pressure that the quarterback. It is so hard. And just hearing you run through just these options of we're talking about one process, Brandon. We're talking about one process of things that have to be filtered through to make these decisions. When a guy, because we haven't even talked about the choice route options, right? You think a lot about what Amon-Ra St. Brown gets to do, and it's like, well, okay, based on we've both read zone, right? If you're the quarterback and now he's read zone and you've read zone, can the guy that you're asking, hey, you've got 3 or 4 choice routes based on leverage and points of,
Yep.
hey, here's the linebacker, here's the nickel, here's the safety, and what the combination of, I mean, now we're getting into when you're not on the same page as him, what does that look like from a quarterback receiver relationship from the decision complexity side? Because if you guys both read the if then rules the same based on
Yeah.
coverage, ideally, if he runs the route he's supposed to run, everyone's on the same page. I just don't feel
Yeah.
like that happens a lot.
It's not a very sexy answer, but it's just time on task with that guy. It's getting him to process the leverage and the depth of that defender the same way that you do, right? Darren Sproles and Drew were fantastic at this. May not ever see anybody that good at it again because of their understanding of leverage and timing. That's the lost kind of X factor with this is there's time that's involved in all of this decision making, all of this, what's the safeties doing, what the leverage is. There's time that is counting down very quickly. And so the opportunity to kind of second guess, well, are we on the same page, or did he see the leverage the same way I saw it? Did he see this guy flat-footed like I saw him flat-footed? It's you can't imagine the amount of just practice that goes into being on the same page just concerning time. That's a whole nother level of understanding and discussion about how quickly things happen, because then becomes like what happens when you scramble and all this other stuff. And there's a whole nother level of decision making that has to happen now that I'm moving off of that particular spot. But the easy answer is it's just a lot of practice, but it's repetition of that timing and really getting a feel for muscle memory, training your body, training habits,
but Luke,
training thought processes to go, this is how it works out.
Let me ask you this. What happens when that player, right? So we could do it in practice all day. We could do it on air all day. We can do it against all these guys. What happens then eventually when we start getting into real live action on Sundays against whatever in the stakes and later in the game?
Yeah.
You could practice all you want to, but what happens
all you want.
when that ball is snapped and you have to make the right decision? The reality is not everyone can do it, right? And that's the hope behind the score, is to help teams understand who to layer up and who not to layer up.
Something interesting that Luke is talking about is the time element in the recognition, right? And so oftentimes coaches default to asking, what are you supposed to do? What were you supposed to do in this particular situation? You can number up and layer up all those variables, and 99% of receivers and quarterbacks will give you the right answer.
Yeah.
But when it happens in real time, being able to be on the same page is just quite remarkable about how you read that and make that decision in real time. And I want to go back to the practice thing. How often do quarterbacks practice those kinds of things? Like, here's the look of the safety, and then have the safety actually confuse a quarterback in practice. How often do you practice the actual read action or read choice, like or choice route?
Violating his expectation, right?
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that probably not enough. Probably not enough is probably the best answer. But because you always, it's going back to the Mike McDaniel and Tua conversation, you want to be ready to throw number one. And so I want to ingrain in my process and my, like, when it happens, I want to be ready to pull the trigger, right? Absolutely. There's got to be some amount of, but what if it doesn't? And I've got to be ready for that, right? I got to be ready for that. So, but what am I going to spend more time on as a player? And I can say this probably as a young player, the what ifs held me up more than this is what I'm 80% sure is going to happen. And the 20% I'll react. Right? The 20% I'll react. So going back to Harrison, what you were saying, like, what if it doesn't happen? When Darren Sproles lines up, he, based on the team that we're playing and the formation maybe that we're in and the pre-snap look, he already checks off a couple of boxes going, okay, I'm not running that. I'm not making that decision or that decision. So I went from 5 different options on this route to now 3.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean at the snap, the other 2 can't come back alive.
That's it right there.
They can,
Yes.
but they're lower on the totem pole now. And so what that does is allows a quarterback or a route runner with options to predetermine is the wrong word, but to I always say play the percentages.
Yeah.
It allows him to attack more confidently with these 3, knowing that I'm 70% likely going to get one of these opportunities, and then react, based on athleticism, based on practice, based on react to the outlier of one of those other 2 being resurrected as options in the process.
And that's why when it's wrong, it looks really wrong, and it's normally
Really wrong.
really bad. And that's why you hear stories like Tom Brady. He'd be like, man, if you ran the wrong route in different combinations based on the look one time, okay. You did it a second time, you do it a third time, I'm not looking at you anymore. And you hear like Welker and those guys talk about this, especially Edelman on his podcast. And you're like, oh man, he's kind of getting into this decision complexity element.
Absolutely. And the great ones, you wouldn't know that, that the 20% came back alive at the snap.
Right.
The great ones, you wouldn't know that.
That's right.
They're able to adjust on the fly. I always say this about the majority of quarterbacks. Okay. And I use that majority word. There's absolutely some unicorns out there, but the majority of us are all pretty even with regard to arm strength, athleticism, intelligence. But the great ones all have one thing that stood out, right? Just something different. The Favre had his arm was just different than everybody else's, right? Mike Vick had an athleticism different. Lamar has an athleticism different. Yeah. I mean, Tom had a coolness that was just different from all the rest of us. Pat Mahomes seems to have that same trait where it just somehow his blood pressure drops when he's back on the field. We saw that a couple of years ago in the playoffs. His heart rate was actually higher when he was standing on the sideline than when he was on the field. And so but for the most part, we're all pretty even. The guys that do it the most consistently, and I always say this about Drew, and Matt Ryan was like this to a large extent. They could check off all those boxes, whether it was walking up to the line, what's the front, what are safeties doing, what are all the variables, what are all the options that are about to take place, and then in a millisecond after the snap going, okay, that, and that didn't take place, so here are the only other three things that can happen.
Right.
They check those boxes. Most of us check them off like this. Boom, 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 boom. They check them off in one sweep. It's like they hit them all at once. Right. Most of us normal people have to go step by step through. All right, I check the safety box, then the linebacker box, then the leverage box. It's like, when you hit in your email, when you hit delete all, and it just all the check marks come up at the same time. That's how it works for those guys. And I was never like that. It took me a minute. Later in my career, I could check them off pretty fast. But those are guys that are special. And I think, with regards to coverages and where I'm going with the ball, to me, Drew was always, here's what's most likely about to happen. And because I'm playing this like 80%, it's going to be this coverage. I'm 80% sure this is where I'm going with the ball. And when you do that, and then you add experience and talent on top of it, now you're able to see some really special things happen with accuracy, with ball location, with all this different stuff that he was able to do.
Well, one of our last topics here, I want to get into this, and I want this from the science side because, Brandon, it's interesting. You started talking about how do we train when something violates his expectations. And it's interesting. We've talked to really, really, really high-level quarterback coaches about how do you train, right, that curl flat read? And I know that's really elementary, but what does a defender look like? So can you talk about how does science tells us that we're supposed to train layering these decision rules when there's more than one decision that could happen?
Yeah, and this is where I wanted to land with Luke as we sort of wind down this pod. we're talking about the highest level, right? We're talking about the NFL,
Yeah.
but Luke,
Yeah.
you've got boys playing at the high school level. We all,
Yep.
are involved in that. How do we train decisions at the quarterback position for 99% of us, the kids that are
Yep.
playing high school ball? How do we get those kids better? Science tells us that we can learn to be more efficient in filtering through these if then statements
Sure.
in a very specific way. And that way is we've got to isolate first. And
Yeah.
that's isolate the single decision. So covering the curl, covering the curl,
Yep.
covering the curl. And what you're doing there for that youngster is you're laying down the visual representation of what it looks like when the DB is covering the curl. You've already alluded to it. What's the hip
Yeah.
angle? What's the shoulder angle? What's the foot placement?
Yep.
What's the first step post snap that cues you he's covering the curl? So once you've repped that in isolation, you go to the other decision. So you're repping the flat, repping the flat, repping the flat. And what he's doing, he's building up this visual representation
Yeah.
again of that decision. What is the
Yep.
foot placement? What's the hip angle? And then we become very systematic and very methodical. We just bounce back and forth. We go curl, flat, curl, flat. You're building a little bit of flexibility in the system's ability to detect those two difference. And then now you're moving to more game like where it's random. Now the DB's
Yeah.
picking what he's covering, and you've made that system more efficient at picking up the visual details that give you the cue of what
Yeah.
coverage or what's going to happen. And so, from our perspective, that's the way to sort of move the needle in these decisions. Now, is that applicable at the NFL level? No idea. I mean, it's going to set the fundamental of how you
Yeah.
practice those decision
Sure.
speeds. But talk to us, Luke, from your perspective, your Texas high school quarterback,
Yeah.
and I'm not talking about the kid who is Elite 11 finalist. How do you work with these athletes in helping them make better and quicker decisions? Because even at the high school level, once you've got an offensive line that can do their job, and obviously in
Yep.
Texas, you're playing against some DBs who are going to be next level. So we're going to assume that the quarterback has an offensive line and he's got more than
Yep.
one dude he can throw it up to. How do you work with that quarterback to help him make more sound and efficient decisions? Because time is a factor even at the high school level.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think first things first, what you said, isolating, in my language, isolating number one, right? I kind of go back to riding a bike, right? I want my kids to know like how to handle when you hit a pothole or you hit a bump in the road. But that's not what I'm going to teach them right when I take off the training wheels. Like you're going to ride, and you're going to ride on a flat, level surface, and you're going to get the feel for that flat, level surface before I have you turn a corner or navigate a hole in the road or a bump in the road or whatever. Those things are coming. But ideally, when we design a play, it's going to be a flat, level surface, and the read's going to be obvious, right? So we're going to get that down
That's good.
first. We're going to get that down first, and we're going to be really comfortable, really confident in that. And then saying the exact same thing. What I do is, if I'm using the bike riding analogy, I might, instead of just let go of the handlebars and let go of the seat while I'm trying to help them like ride on a flat level surface, I may actually just nudge it just a little bit so that it kind of you get the feel for, whoa, that's a little imbalanced. And my brain has to kick in for what do I do now? Well, I got to shift my weight back. I got to get back to where it feels level again. So in terms of football, I'm gonna flash something in front of their eyes and make them see differently, right? It's not you get a process talking about time. You get a process of a couple of milliseconds, and then it changes, and it might change the angle or depth, right, of the DB that's running the route. So to me, obviously it's defenders and placement, but the main things are, can you detect angle, depth, and speed? Angle, depth, and speed. And if you can do that, if you can detect angle, depth, and speed of a defender, angle, depth, and speed of a route, then as a quarterback, we'll figure out how to get the ball where it needs to go And so I have guys running at different angles, different speeds. A lot of times, let's go to the curl flat analogy. I'll have the defender, come from different positions. So he can be pre-aligned over a slot receiver, or he can be, tucked inside the box and he's running out to that flat, that flat zone coverage area. And so it's how many different ways can my quarterback understand that this is what we're trying to read and what we're reacting off of. But just because he's there right now doesn't mean he's going to stay there. And just because he's not there right now doesn't mean he won't be there in just a second. And so angle, depth, and speed helps for our quarterbacks. It kind of helps them get a feel for, or at least start ingraining that mechanism in their mind that tells them what kind and what type of throw is about to take place. A number of different drills to do that with, right? And a whole bunch of different drills to do that with. I've seen guys throwing different colored, tennis balls in the air, and if it's red, that means that this happened. And so you're trying to train all the different neural processes. You know more about that than I do. Neural processes that tell me what decision to make, because the hard part about football is football practice is it's never live, and it's hard to do one-on-one. Like I need a receiver to throw to, and then I need a defender to cause me to do something different. So what are the different ways that I can create or try and create where it's mimicking those variables of where a defender is going to be, what the coverage might be, and how it might change, outside of just yelling it out. Like I want your eyes confirming, right? And to me, this is the hard part. When I stand behind a quarterback, one of my quarterbacks, and I yell out man, and he throws it here, or I yell out zone and he throws it here. Well, his eyes aren't being trained to see what he needs to take place. So there needs to be some kind of visual cue that says this is where I'm going with the ball.
I was hoping you'd pop in there, Brandon,
whether it's
yep, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's I've always imagined something like a playing card, but really big, right? That is thrown up in front of him and it has a number on it. And so I've got to figure out, well, if it says 3, it's cover 3. I'm going there with the ball. It's something that my eyes are making me confirm what happened on the field. And when I don't have 7 guys, if I'm not playing 7-on-7, I'm just out there training quarterbacks and receivers, then I don't have a way of doing that.
Yeah.
And so is it a wasted practice? No, but am I really training the game? Am I training the processes of confirmation with brain, eyes, and feet to get me to the right result that I want to have my quarterback make, right? And so that's a long way of saying still working through the drills, still working out, and trying to figure out the best way to do it.
No, that's awesome. I mean, we always encourage some type of throwing on air is wonderful when you're working on technique and fundamentals and things like that, but always have some type of decision. And the decision can come in the form of being distracted or somebody running at you or whatever. But I do love the idea of marrying at least the decision with the action, right? And by doing the playing card thing, you're forcing them to make a decision and then do the action. What you need is the perception that leads to that decision, which is why you need all the guys. So are there ways we can think through putting all those pieces together? You're absolutely moving the needle, Luke. I mean, I love the way you're thinking about that. So some decision that gets you to, this is what the defense is doing, here's where I throw.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the battle that we fight daily, and the other battle is this. And you guys know this, every throw is an off-platform scramble, laid out sidearm, throw. And that's what they, I get quarterbacks, that's what they want to run around and throw them. Like, we gotta ride on flat surface first, and then we'll worry about doing that, right?
Go back to your bike.
And so that's the other battle that we fight.
Exactly
right.
Yeah,
go back to your bike. Get on your bike.
Man, that's some good dad advice as we transition here to the next portion of the discussion and podcast. Luke, I really appreciate your expertise here. You've taught us a lot about all of the things that go. I mean, look, every time I talk to you guys, I'm like, this position's impossible. That's the reality of where we've come to this. Is this position is impossible. the transition here for the random funny questions. Sometimes neither random, sometimes not funny. But I do want to ask you this. Okay. So 3 questions. You're the youngest of 3, right? Is that correct? The youngest of 3
Yep,
brothers.
that's right.
I'm guessing
I got a baby sister,
okay, but I'm guessing you got picked on, right? So I'm guessing you okay,
oh
so
yeah.
if that's the case, do you have any advice for the 3rd brother that's out there listening?
Oh, fight back.
Okay.
Fight back.
Well, that's tough.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, hey, his words, not mine. I'm also the oldest.
Yeah, no, that's it. Fight back. And listen, my dad would always say this, and a little bit tongue in cheek, right? But my dad was the oldest of 3 brothers, so whether this was from experience or whatever, but my dad was the oldest of 3 brothers. But he would always say this: just wait till they go to sleep.
Oh,
Just wait till they go to
tough.
sleep. You know,
That's tough.
it's like, Dad, did one of your brothers do that to
Yeah,
you?
that's right.
Now he would always say, "You better make it
Yeah.
good. You know, you better knock him
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
Make it count.
or
Make it count.
make it count, because he's gonna wake up."
Not an official recommendation by S2, I will say. Okay, does
That's
Papa
right.
McCown have a basement full of jerseys? And if he does, McCown Senior, does he have a favorite jersey? And if so, what is it?
So we're in Texas, so we don't have basements. But
That's funny.
I would say, man, you know what? If I had to guess, and I've never asked him that question, that's a great question. That's a great
Hard-hitting
question.
questions here.
That hard hitting questions. He would pull out, you know, a 1968, 1969 number 88 wide receiver jersey from Jacksonville High School when he played. He calls it split end. They didn't call it wide receiver. Split end. And that's what he would tell you is his favorite jersey
So his
to wear.
favorite jersey is his own?
That's
Is that
awesome.
what I mean? It's not.
His own, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
What is final question? What's next on the horizon for you? Where are you at? Where are you looking to go? What are you looking to do?
Yeah, I've got 6 kids. I've got 4 boys and 2 girls, and my oldest is heading out to Limestone University, a really good Division II program to play football out there in Gaffney, South Carolina. Formerly Mike Furry, Jericho Cotry is now the head coach out there, and yeah, so looking forward to that. Really good little program, and he's excited about that. But I've got 3 other boys coming up underneath him. One that's a really good 400-meter runner. Another one that feels like he's the second coming of Pat Mahomes already.
There's a few of those out there.
And then one that there's a few of those out there. And then a boy that Cooper Cup's his guy, so he doesn't know whether he wants to play receiver or quarterback. And then my 2 girls are athletes as well. One was a gold medalist this year in track, 7th grade track, and triple jump, high jump, 400 meter, and a heck of a basketball. So, I've got my hands tied from that perspective. But I always said I didn't want to coach. Matter of fact, there was when I was in Jacksonville, and Dirk Cutter was applying for a couple of different jobs, head coaching jobs around the league and even in college. And he asked me, "Hey, you want to be with my quarterback coach when we get done?" I was still at like year 8 or 9. I was like, "Dirk, what are you trying to tell me, man? I feel like I can still play, And so, but I always said I wasn't interested in coaching. And then when I got done, it was just kind of the natural thing of find some kids and pour into them, tell them what try and help them. And so I'm doing a lot of that, some private quarterback stuff, which kind of fits where I'm at right now in life with my kids. I get to kind of pick and choose when and how and where. I think it would be a neat deal if Josh, gets another opportunity at a head job someday to link up and do something for a couple of years. Josh wants to be the guy that's, Pete Carroll and coaches till he's 75 or whatever. That's not me. Like, I like to hunt and fish. But I love ball and I love, breaking it down and talking about it. So scratching that itch for a couple of years, I think would be a lot of fun. But really seeing where the Lord leads it. He's in control of all of it. I used to write a scripture on my wrist for 17 years throughout college too. It says the man's heart plans the way, but the Lord directs his steps. And so I've got ideas that come into my heart all the time. Just kind of let God lead the rest of it. Leave it up to him, and that served me well so far.
Man, I have really enjoyed you being on this podcast. Just to break this down, I also didn't have Robert Meacham and Jericho Cotchery on my bingo card. So if you had that listening to today,
you go.
Ding,
ding,
you
ding.
win. But man, Luke, that's a 14-year NFL veteran, Luke McCown. Thanks so much for joining us on the S2 Pod. Just break down one simple process that we try to measure for teams and coaches and players is how well do you handle and execute the decisions when we layer you up with complexity. So thank you so much.
Awesome. You bet, man. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the S2 Cognition podcast. If you like the content we're putting out, please subscribe with that plus sign at the top of your app, leave a review about the episode, and share it with a few friends. You can follow us on Twitter at S2Cognition and Instagram at S2.Cognition. If you'd like to get in touch with the program or show, please visit our website at S2Cognition.com/podcast. Thanks again for listening to the S2 Cognition podcast. I'm your host, Harrison Hunter, signing off for now. We will talk to you soon.